Whether Trump knew it or not, Russian mobsters and corrupt oligarchs used Trump's properties not only to launder vast sums of money from extortion, drugs, gambling, and racketeering, but even as a base of operations for their criminal activities. Without the Russian mafia, it is fair to say Donald Trump would not be president of the United States. Over the past 3 decades, at least 13 people with known or alleged links to Russian mobsters or oligarchs have owned, lived in, and even run criminal activities out of Trump Tower and other Trump properties. Many used his apartments and casinos to launder untold millions in dirty money. Some ran a worldwide high-stakes gambling ring out of Trump Tower and a unit directly below one owned by Trump.
If you want to know when he was first compromised by the Russians, I go back 33 years to 1984, and at that time, a guy named David Bogadin walked into Trump Tower. He was a Russian immigrant, and he had ties to the most powerful crime ring in Russia. And he sat down with Donald Trump, and he bought not one apartment, not two, but 5 condos in Trump Towers. And the state attorney general later ruled that that was laundering money. And Trump Towers, in many ways, had been set up as a perfect vehicle for money laundering. It was at the time, it was one of only 2 buildings in New York City where anonymous people could use shell companies to buy condominiums.
Describe the financial situation that Donald Trump was in the late 90s.
He had come close to personal bankruptcy. He ultimately oversaw 6 corporate bankruptcies, and he had become in the late 1980s and for most of the 1990s this punchline about the excesses of the 1980s. Trump found himself on the financial precipice. He had guaranteed personally almost $900 million in loans. He owed some of the biggest banks in the US about $3.6 billion, and he couldn't pay back any of it.
The complaint demonstrates that Donald Trump falsely inflated his net worth by billions of dollars to unjustly enrich himself and to cheat the system, thereby cheating all of us.
Now, at some point, he starts looking for more money overseas. He's having trouble borrowing money here. And how much did he need foreign cash?
I think it's really important for people to understand how small Donald Trump's business is. The sort of notion that he is the recipient of billions and billions of dollars of money flowing in from overseas, I think is mythic, because his business is so small that it hasn't relied on billions and billions of dollars from overseas. When Donald Trump says that most of the family's assets come in from Russia, I think what he's actually talking about are condominium sales. I don't think he's talking about $1 billion of bank loans. He's talking about units in these various Trump properties that change hands. And it's important to remember that Hong Kong, London, and New York, all in the real estate communities, are the center of a lot of this loose money. Some of it's dirty, undoubtedly. Some of it's being laundered, undoubtedly. Some of it's also just people overseas who are in countries where they're not sure they can safely invest their cash where they live. They put it in property in places like London and New York. So it's a very mixed bag, but it's certainly not multi.
Do we know whether any of that laundered money ended up in Trump properties?
Well, I think the biggest example of this, and I think it's one of the most troubling, is a project that used to be known as the Trump Soho, a mixed-use condominium hotel in Lower Manhattan that is alleged in court papers to have been a conduit for money being laundered from Eastern Europe and through people who had organized crime backgrounds and people that Trump himself knew to have organized crime backgrounds. And I know he knew because we asked him about it in a deposition in our litigation, and he was presented with the information that one of his primary business partners had a background, had gone to jail, and also was affiliated with the mob. And Trump continued famously with that man. His name was Felix Sater.